Okay. So now what we are going to do is we are going to look at the strategic analysis, and I want to clarify this. Okay, I want you to know the purpose of this. The essential purpose is, look, you have to think like a leader, and you get all kinds of questions in the unseen, right? You're basically getting questions across 5 core activities, which when you look at it overall broadly, which basically covers everything, right? It's what like it's essentially, think of it like a home, and you basically get questions or problems or scenarios that both the father and the mother in the home faces, right? Basically it's all of it. You get strategic questions, you get risk related questions, you get internal control issues, you get reputation issues, you get ecosystem and external market related issues. You've got to deal with financing, financial management, treasury, all sorts of things. So in order to face this sort of scenario, this sort of case study, the idea is that you must actually be someone who understands the business really well. Now, the first part of understanding the business was what we've looked at so far. We've used the information provided in the pre-scene in order to develop and establish a clear baseline of the understanding we are expected to have by CIMA. So we know exactly what this company is, when it started, its history, how it grew, what products it develops, what kind of features, what kind of quality standards we maintain, how the pricing strategy works as opposed to competition. We've looked at the financial analysis in very good detail. We've extracted the highlights of the financials. So we know exactly where we are doing well, where we are doing poorly, and how we are doing in comparison to the closest competitor, Thermwick. So we've established that baseline very strongly. Now what we are going to do is we are going to take this one step further in order to further familiarize ourselves with this business, like really effectively, really thoroughly. With that understanding and that assurance I wanted to give you, the first tool we apply is the most important tool, because it pretty much brings out everything that we want to look at, which is the SWOT analysis. So can everyone see the screen clearly?
Yes, it's clear.
Okay. So what we've done here is we've looked at the strengths and the weaknesses broadly, right? Now, of course, it's a perspective matter, and there may be certain strengths here or certain elements that you might not see. But what I've tried to do is I've tried to bring out the most impactful strengths and weaknesses. Let's try to go through them and see whatever is missing or whatever you would like to add as well. Strengths, it's one of the earliest and largest domestic players in the industry in Norland and a multinational entity. We have a huge workforce and 2 product dedicated factories. We have 1 factory for gas boilers, 1 factory for heat pumps. It's pretty simple as well. Strong ethos, a value system, vision, mission, all of that. And we've historically been consistent. And that is a very important strength in my personal opinion, because consistent performers are those, even during setbacks and they have challenging times, if they've consistently performed for a very long duration, they know how to get back because they're consistent in their efforts. So that track record we see with Hottayr in this case. We have an experienced board, high-risk approach. In many cases, you would have remembered there was a slide I dedicated in the company analysis called milestones. And that is not something you usually see with a pre-scene, but this is a very strong company in the area of heating. They've achieved so many milestones. The first company to give a 10-year guarantee, the first company to enter the heat pump sector. Their products have 15 years as opposed to the general 12-year lifetime, etc., etc., etc. So many, and they have an inline net carbon zero emission or zero carbon emission target that is in line with the government. So many milestones they've achieved. They have a good, consistent track record of being an early mover and a high risk model that has worked for them. So that is a strength. And this is something that you probably can capitalize on, especially if you're unseen or in the question in the exam is somewhat of a question that tries to pin you down, tries to pin the business, or tries to, maybe a newspaper article, someone is writing a very critical article about, how you can't really achieve whatever you're setting out to achieve. And then you can say, look, that's not the case. And maybe dedicate a few sentences to say, we have an excellent track record. These are the things that very briefly what we've done. And that itself is on the one hand, proof that we can continue to do so in the future. And the other aspect of high risk, and why I've included it here as a strength, is because generally with high risk, what we see is high risk, high return, right? Higher the risk, higher the return. This is the general policy. Of course, higher the risk, the potential and the extent of loss can also be high, but it is only the high risk takers that take home more. So that is also a general strength as I note it. Many innovations, improvements, and patents. So a lot of intellectual property, which is very strong and a good strength to have in this kind of space. Strong relationship with builders, the third parties that can actually buy wholesale from us. So it's better and easier to move large bulks than individual units, retailing. Not that retailing is bad. You can have better margins, you can have a better presence, you can have better control over your product and how it, goes to the end consumer. And you actually are able to build a stronger relationship with the end consumer, the one who uses as well, which is always a good thing. But however, it is also as advantageous to have a distributor line or to have these third parties working with you, because you can move large volumes very fast. And as a business, that's always good. Extremely quality focused. We had 2 slides dedicated in the company analysis, understanding how focused we are on quality from the lifetime of the product, from the efficiency, from the safety certificate that we received. We are the first company to receive a safety certificate from Nolan Gas, from the energy regulating company in the country, probably. So that is a huge strength. Reputation, and based on that, we've developed a very big reputation for quality and efficiency. We have Wi-Fi connectivity enabled heat pumps. So basically that's level 1 IoT, right? Level 1 Internet of Things capability, because if you have a device that can connect to the Wi-Fi or the network wireless, you're basically talking about IoT trends. And as we go along, it can be level 2, level 3, higherly and better digitized IoT applications. Increasing sales of both products. So both of our products, if you take gas boilers and heat pumps, financially are doing well. Our revenue is growing. Our export revenue is growing. So we are doing better in the outside markets as well. And we have a dedicated in-house IT team, which can be a strength. And in my opinion, it is a strength, given that we can exert a bigger or better control over the cyber space, right? Over how we manage the IT related aspects of our business. And especially any innovations we want to do in that front in the future, we can have better control internally. Weaknesses, the volatile share price. Of course, a weakness doesn't mean that it's currently affecting us negatively, that it's currently putting us down. But when you look at the share stock movement, you continuously see a pattern. And I highlighted this last week. Almost 10 times over the past 3 years, our price has tanked a little, right? We've been under pressure, but every time we've come back. So which is a good thing, but that's not necessarily always a good trend also. It can always, like what we are doing, right? We are talking about it. I mean, why talk about it? If you have a very steadily increasing share price, this conversation wouldn't even come up. So that in itself, I see as a point of weakness. The first impression of cost management is poor, the first impression, but last week we very in detail, we looked at how that can actually be the better long-term strategy to spend more now because our revenue is growing anyway, but whatever we are spending, even though in the P&L, we are including it as an expense item, operating expense, in reality, it might actually be an investment because we are spending on the right areas to acquire the right customers, to maybe do the branding and the marketing in the right manner so that the product will stay longer in the market. So we might reap these benefits, and it's just one way you can argue, right? Poor cost management. And you can definitely say the other story and, maybe pitch it to the strength side as well, saying expenses in the right direction or expenses that can reap benefits in the long term, right? Depends on perspective. And the unseen, right? And the scenario you get in the unseen. It can work both ways, whatever you get in the exam. No low-cost product and seemingly losing the budget category customers. So that's another point I was thinking about. In fact, because we seem to be premium pricing our products, that indication is given. We seem to maintain a very high standard, and because of that, and that is also evident by Thermwic's higher sales. And they say that Thermwic, our competitor, is not doing really well, or rather, their products are not up to our standards, right? They say their products are a little lower, so in quality, so they're able to price it at a budget range compared to our products. And is that the reason why they are making more money, why they are growing more, and also not spending as much as us? Because we might be spending on quality a lot, but they're not spending, right? They're not spending. They actually managed to reduce their expenses over year on year. So how did they do that? One explanation to that is the fact that they are because of the poor quality they maintain, they don't have to invest large expenses in order to retain that quality, source better material, be consistent with the quality of the material you're using, steel, aluminum, things like that. Heavy dependency on house builders. So even though the third-party distributor, the connector between us and the retailer or the end consumer is important, the fact that we are dependent on them is also something that can push us into weak places, because they can have some sort of a bargaining power, and that can, really add pressure, especially at times when we really have to deliver to shareholders, at times when we are under pressure to save the stock. We can't really see, at times when we can't really afford for the revenue to be seen coming down, we might be under pressure, and these distributors or house builders might take good advantage of it, right? Saying we want discounts or whatever, if they know that we really have to push this volume at times when we've got a product that is slowly going out of the market, going out of trend, and we have a large volume, and we see that next by the year next, we'll have to get rid of this. If we have it, we'll have to scrap it because there's going to be new product coming up into the market, maybe by ourselves, maybe by competitors. Flonase is operating in Norland, so they are also up to par in standards with us. So they could always come up with alternate options. So if that is the case and we are under pressure to move a large bulk, then we might, have a lower bargaining power with house builders, etc. So there can be so many scenarios of how that dependency on house builders can be or can work in a negative manner for us. Thermwic outdoing financial performance in many areas. So we looked at it. Low comparable dividend payout. So I've added comparable because it's exactly what it is. Compared to Thermwic, we are paying lower. Our dividend payout is lower in terms of absolute terms and in terms of percentage terms. Now, of course, this doesn't mean that it is an absolute weakness, that we are doing bad here, but it is just an observation that could lead to a weakness. And it is something that is related to the volatile share price as well, because we never know if this particular decline in the share price, this investors, always bringing the share price down, whenever we bring it back up, is it also related to the limited gains they are getting in terms of dividends. And then we have to work so hard to bring the share price back up in terms of performance, in terms of, the market value or the market perception that they have about our company. So these are the main points. Anything that you would like to add here for strengths and weaknesses? Anything major that you feel should stand out in your opinion? Please feel free. So this is Sushma's response, and I really liked it. And it was a good capture. I've basically provided a summary of these points. Okay, I think this is a good point. Access to a large amount of consumer data. Through digitization, we know our heat pumps are connected to the Wi-Fi devices. So we are collecting temperature related data. And that is definitely, I think, a good strength to mention. And the consideration to the customer feedback. That's also a strong point, right? Because we actually give a lot of importance to the consumer. So that helps us understand the consumer and respond to consumer needs better. So that's an excellent point. Anything else? No. Okay. That brings me to opportunities and threats. So when it comes to opportunities, there's so many. And some of these opportunities we have capitalized already, and doesn't mean that we've exhausted them. Some of these we are yet to capitalize. Some of them may materialize in the future. Product development broadly, right? This is a very broad discussion. Product development, so new products, market development, product innovations, coming up with new intellectual property, new patents, etc. Low-end opportunity, I talked about how Thermwick seem to be capitalizing on the low-end market, and we seem to only be targeting, we're like the Apple of heat appliances, let's say, but we can also target the Samsung market, so or Micromax or Oppo or whatever. Booming industry. There's a valuation record, if you would have gone through the research, of up to about $70 billion by 2030, the heating appliances market. So that's a huge industry and a space that is available. The opportunity is great. We can go into IoT enabled products, especially with the thermostats. Thermostats are a big deal in this industry. And there are a lot of companies who manufacture a lot of different designs and different capabilities into thermostats. And with new homes, which are like the smart home concept, which has Alexa integrated. So as you're driving into the parkway itself, the entire house, it's like a person and it knows that you're entering. So it switches on the lights and the room and the music, and the door is unlocked automatically and the garage is unlocked. So you enter the house and there's water heating, and it asks you, do you need a coffee? And the coffee brewer is working. So all that. And then another thing is the thermostat can ask you what temperature do you want, and then you'll be like 25 degrees Celsius, and then as you're entering the home itself, it's the right temperature is set, etc., etc. So I know it seems like a utopia, and a little a little weird to be talking about that sort of, technology in a world that is going through so much challenges these days. So when you look at it, these kind of luxuries are very exclusive and seemingly, exclusively dedicated only to serve a little group of the population in the world. But that is that just has been how the world has worked, and I'm thankful for that. It keeps us away from a lot of potential negative tendencies. So that's a good thing. Mergers and acquisitions are an opportunity. Data, of course. So when I say data here, data, big data, data management, data visualization, database, data collection, data migration, data handling, all kinds of things with data. Whatever you can do with data is included here. Sustainability initiatives, of course, with the 2040 net target, but also incorporating the UN Sustainability Development Goals into our company's corporate vision, mission, going into sustainability reporting, corporate CSR activities, corporate social responsibility, ESG framework integration, the global reporting initiative, triple bottom line reporting, all kinds of sustainability elements can come into play. Renewable energy, renewable sources, etc. Now, global warming, you might actually be a little like, how can global warming be a negative? See, what global warming does is it brings extreme climates into play. So whatever, countries that have had a -5 degrees, the worst, and 40 degrees at its height as the highest, and -5 lowest, what global warming does is it pushes these extremes. It says, okay, your country was -5, we're going to take it to -15, right? And your country has experienced 40 degrees, we're going to take it to 55. So with climates, so summers are hotter than usual and winters are colder than usual. And that is definitely an opportunity for heating, ventilation, and air condition or HVAC manufacturers. It's an opportunity, right? However bad it may seem. And the more, unfortunately, right, the more of these non-renewable source-based appliances we put into play, and it can be refrigerators, it can be, heating appliances, it can be industrial manufacturing, whatever. The more we include them, the higher the opportunity and the higher the global warming gets, right? Hotter the globe gets, colder the colder regions get. So it's a really kind of a dilemma, right? It's something. The only solution is trees, but nowadays people don't really seem to care much for trees, and also there seem not to be a lot of space for trees, right? So that's crazy. I saw recently I saw this video of I think a city, several cities, including New Delhi in India, Manila in Philippines, and some European cities on Al Jazeera, where the atmosphere, it's like you can't, even on a bright, clear day, you can't see longer than a few meters, a few 100 meters. You can't see further because the atmosphere is thick, smoky, reddish, and the air is polluted to that extent, right? It's that severe air pollution, and people are wailing and people are struggling a lot to breathe. Imagine creating a world that is difficult for a group of people to breathe in. So that's crazy. Synergies with related sectors, again, a very broad concept. There are so many, we will look at it when we look at strategic options, but there are so many ways of how a company like Hottayr, who build gas boilers and heat pumps currently for the residential market, there are so many ways of how we can expand and build synergies vertically, horizontally, cross-sell, upsell, downsell, do all kinds of things with all kinds of players, right? So there are a lot of collaborative opportunities there. As far as threats are concerned, continuous pressure on the share price, we note. So we don't know how, because it can be like a bubble. that suddenly bursts. We've been able to save the balloon or the bubble so far, but it can always go off, right? So that's a potential threat. We want to, like, if possible, we want to always be in a safe place, because especially with, think of this, nobody expected COVID, right? Nobody expected it. And then it suddenly hit, a global pandemic. And when you look at companies, you take a look at all the major S&P 500 companies and look at their stock. What happened? They were not prepared. And you'll find in the middle, you'll find a few players, few companies who did really well, right? Because during the stages where the initial news of COVID started to come, this is, I'm talking December, October, November 2019. During those time periods, these companies took the news seriously, and they started taking measures and putting various steps in play to respond to a potential pandemic situation. So they were better equipped. They bought more material, right? Some companies bought more material. Their supply chain was strong. At least they sourced more to make sure that they wouldn't run out. So there were a lot of players who prepared this way. If you look at the e-commerce sector as well, there were some players who really did well, who boomed more than the others. E-commerce overall boomed, but some boomed over the others because they were first movers. They took the threat seriously and they responded to it as fast as possible, as soon as possible. So if we can always do that, if we can understand that there is always this situation where our share price goes a little down, and then we always have to fight hard to get it back up. Why can't we be in a safe place? Why can't we put this into a safe position? And if that position can be achieved, it is definitely something worth looking at, but has to be done without mitigating or without negating the high return potential. So it's a smart play to do. You have to maintain that high risk, high return approach so that you don't entirely, say no to the higher return you're going to get. But you also want to make sure that you are strong from the share price end. So that's a threat to consider. And there are so many ways to address that. Potential competitor threat from Thermwick. A dire need to be vigilant and protect the reputation. So the fact that our reputation is big also means that it's always under threat, right? It also means that we are always on the lookout for the smallest thing that can negatively affect our reputation. We are always we want to protect it as much as possible. And that increases the threat of reputation risk bigger. Risk of data theft and cyber risks, all kinds of cyber risks are there. We have a task dedicated for that. So we'll look at it closely. Weak financial performance in certain areas, so that can always turn into a threat, and the high risk attitude that we have. All right. Okay. Anything that would stand out here, or anything that you would like to add? Okay, I like this. This can shift to the opportunity end as well. It's a good point. Okay, dedicated HR team. So some weakness in corporate governance, which is a good point when it comes to opportunities and threats. Let's see. New products, government incentives, collaborations, discounting, advancement of IT, digitization, excellent. Competitive threat, cybersecurity threat, safety. Yes. Safety related matters. We don't want gas to leak, the refrigerant to leak, accident during disposal or reuse of refrigerant, data privacy threats, etc. Excellent. So good job, Sushma, in this case. And I received only 3 responses, and this was the most extensive one. So I'm choosing to display it on screen. So this exercise should give you a holistic view, right? You have to know the internal strengths and weaknesses and the external opportunities and threats that you can face. With that, I would like to move to the stakeholder analysis. But before I move to that, just tell me one each, right? High power, high interest. One stakeholder, please. High power, high interest.
Shareholders.
Shareholders. Anyone else? Just quickly. High power, high interest. It's very important, guys. Like, it's really important that you are able to quickly grasp.
Government, because they do have a power, and this product which we are dealing with is environmental impact it has. So anything goes wrong, government is there to intervene. They have a power to intervene and they are looking at their interest also, how we are contributing towards the zero carbon emission thing.
Sure, government, that's acceptable. How about high power, low interest? High power, low interest.
The staff, employees.
Employees. And yes, okay, agreed, agreeable. How would you put the high power of employees, Paul?
Because whatever strategy, whatever activities that we want to do or that we want to use to push the company forward, they are the one that will implement it. If, for example, if there is any change, maybe there is a new thing that comes in and they are not in support of it, they can actually ruin the whole thing and cause major problem for the business, which will affect the bottom line. So that's why I see that maybe they have power in some things that I want to do. Or because they just depend on the salary they want to collect there. It's not that they want to share from the profit. That's why I put them on the low interest, as in low benefits, sort of. That's the way I see it.
Sure. Okay. That's a fair argument, fair case. I mean, it can shift. The power level of employees, I think it can shift depending on the circumstance.
The circumstances, yes.
Can I say environmentalists, the persons who are more concerned towards the environment?
So high power?
Yes, they do have a power because they can do strikes, so they can go against Hottayr if anything is not in line with the sustainability of environment or other aspects. So they do have a high power, but they don't hold an interest. They only come into picture when there is a negative impact.
Okay. Okay. I think so. Yeah, that's well explained. By default, right? By default, as generally as things would stand, if something negative hasn't happened by default, what I would think is that environmental groups are in the category of high interest but low power, because if we are compliant, and generally we have to do this, it's a important product for the world, and we are compliant with rules and regulations and all that, then the environmental groups, what will happen is they are always sensitive. So they always are interested in what we are doing. They're always on the watch out. Look, are they doing this right? Is there a new product? Have they released any refrigerants recently? What are the scandals, environmental scandals they are involved in? So they're always interested, but they can't do much. Their power levels are low. But as you said, the moment something goes wrong, they will, and if we have really done something wrong, right, and if it's really bad, then what we've done is inherently we've pushed their power level also up, because they didn't do it, we did it by doing something negative to the environment. Suddenly they've become important, and suddenly their voice is heard. There's plenty of methods of getting your voice heard nowadays. So there's media, there's all these petitions and things like that. So they can, we've suddenly shifted them up, and they're interested. They're continuously interested, especially given that we deal in an industry which is quite sensitive to the environment around it, and whatever products and manufacturing processes are also quite connected to the environment. They're definitely interested. High interest would be a category they're in. Okay. So I think I've asked you 3. Let's try to look at what I have for you here. Key players. So that's high power, high interest, obviously. Influential shareholders who have a large stake in the company. So because of their stake, because they have a lot of money invested, they have a lot of influence, so high power. But also because there's a lot of money involved, they're highly interested also, because they want to manage their investment really well. Critical employees, they may be very important. They may be people we can't lose. And the employees themselves might be interested in working in the company. So they always have like a careful eye, watching out for what's going on and watching out whether their job is under threat, or whether, how they can contribute better, how they can get promoted, etc. Seats that become vacant. Board of directors, major competitors. That also is a slightly circumstantial matter, but major competitors would always, because if they are major, it means they retain or command a big market share. And that means that, they are like attacking us, or they are a force to reckon with. So they have high power, right? They might have the financial prowess to implement certain marketing, branding exercises, etc. And if we do something wrong, they might have the financial power to invest, to make it worse, to bring us, to make the news more popular, etc., to advertise against it, etc. Directly correlated authorities, regulators, environmental, not necessarily independent ones, but those who have power, etc. Because say, for example, environment related ministries or regulators, right? So they are really interested in companies like us, and they also command a lot of high power, depending that they are regulators. Major customers and suppliers, right? Major customers and suppliers will have a high interest because they are major. They either buy a lot from us or sell a lot to us. And they will also have high power because if they make a big proportion of our revenue or cost, then the dependency they have or we have against or with them is high. So that makes it or makes them key players. Keep satisfied, I would say, diversified large investors who have a stake with us, and therefore they have high power, but they are well diversified. So this is just one in their portfolio. So they have a moderate interest, right? As long as we keep them satisfied, as long as we keep them, we keep giving their return that they expect to them. They don't try to interfere. They don't try to, use their vote in a negative way. We could negotiate with them. We could get them to listen to us, listen to the board of directors, etc. So they're okay, but keep them satisfied. Government in general and authorities in general, like tax authorities, customs authorities I mentioned here, the Securities Exchange Commission. So as long as we are compliant, we obey the law, we are good with them, we don't create any fuss. They have high power, but they're not interested, right? As long as we fulfill, we pay our taxes due properly, promptly, in full, etc., we are good. If we escalate some issue, if we create some problem, then comes the question of who has the bigger stick. And in most cases, these kind of players or entities have the bigger stick. right? And it's very, it would be unwise to try and fight them. Keep informed. So I would say these are entities with low power but high interest. So obviously, general, by default, lenders would have a high interest but low power. As long as we keep paying their due, they can't do anything much. They just have to just take it and leave it at that. And employees in general also, they come, they work, they get their salaries. But employees is a very sensitive situation. Nowadays there's this trend of I think quiet quitting, or quit, something like that, right? This massive trend, and I really don't subscribe to that. I don't really understand where that's coming from even, but I think the pandemic really brought it to force, where this people, I recently someone shared in my group, in one of my friend groups, a video of some young fellow, young chap, making this huge speech about, if you don't like your job, as soon as it's 5 p.m, just go home, don't work. If you don't like your boss, just tell it to them straight and go home, and things like that. Like, go home and sleep was said a lot in that video. And it was like millions and millions of viewers. So I don't really understand what's going on, but employees seem to, the entire dynamic of employees, there's a massive resignation drive that's going on, and that went on in the past couple of years, especially in Northern America. So there are a lot of jobs available, like you won't believe it. There's like jobs here, especially in Canada these days, and I'm just browsing and I'm trying to learn of the job market, and it's endless. It's like scrolling through the Facebook feed. You're scrolling and scrolling and scrolling and scrolling, and you're never really, there's no dearth of jobs. Like, there's so many, and I don't really understand what's going on. Generally, that's not the case. So I think one reason is because of this trend of a lot of people quit. So it's a sensitive place, employees are in. We can always, because if employees rally en masse, right, they really get together and they rally, they unionize, then of course even these employees that we think are not important, like let's say our factory workers, individually a factory worker has an issue, comes, resolves it, or tries to escalate it, can't do much, right? If we have the legal power, and if we can argue it, and if there are two sides to the story anyway, legitimate sides, then an individual employee has little power. But if an employee's matter or something is seen as a threat to all the other employees, and if that employee can rally other employees around him or her, and even bring in the unions, bring in legal ramifications, sue the company, malpractice, unfair dismissals, whatever, whistleblow something that went wrong in the company. So then that power level can shift easily. So that's something to take into account. Anyway, my minimal effort block is empty because I don't really see anyone who doesn't have either an interest or low power, low interest, because it's just the way I see the world. But let's see, Sushma, what do you have here? Yes, so by default, I agree with this. Employees, staff we used to, back in the day, 2-3 years ago anyway, whenever you say low power, low interest, general public, why would they care? People who don't even use heating appliances, right? Sure. Employees in general, right? Low power, low interest, they come, they do their job, they go back home. In an ideal and a calm world, this would definitely be taken into interest. But nowadays, it's different. And look, this exercise is very important because it gives you the opportunity to be one step ahead. Okay. Because you've thought about stakeholders and you've thought about their relationship with your company. And that's very important because in your exam, every single question has one or the other stakeholders involved. And when you're dealing with stakeholders, the first thing you have to do is understand where their power level lies and where their interest level lies, because that will determine. Now, you see, I have two shareholder groups committed to two areas: influential large stake shareholders in key player section, and diversified, well diversified large investors in keep satisfied. Why? Because if a question is talking about a particular group of investors, and they'll explain what kind of investors they are. They may be saying these are diversified investors, these are institutional investors. So they'll give you details. These are investors that have been with us, or these are the founding shareholders who are not. They have a great amount of shares with them. They have influence to vote and change the votes. They have a lot of other shareholders with them, but they are not directly involved in the running of the company anymore, right? They just have a stake. So these kind of different descriptions can come in your exam. Depending on the description, even employees, anyone, right? Government authorities, depending on the scenario and depending on the description, you have to be able to gauge their power level and the interest, because that is how you will decide how to react to the situation. You're not going to pick a fight with a key player generally, right? That would be unwise unless you know very well that ethically, morally, financially, socially, in a corporate sense, that it is the right thing to do and it is the wise thing to do. You are definitely not going to get into a bullfight with a key player. That would really be something of a stupid thing to do in the corporate sector, especially, and have really long-term repercussions. So in deciding how to react to a situation, this consideration is very important. So you have to keep an eye on that. Whenever you deal with a question hereafter, whenever you have a task in the future, keep an eye to the stakeholders and try to identify as fast as possible. And it has to be very automatic, because we've done this exercise. So you don't have to commit extra time for this, but it has to be an automatic exercise. But you should be able to quickly grasp, oh, with this distributor, this is how I should deal with this distributor. Okay, he's just a new player, and we can be polite, we can be have a standard relationship, but we don't have to worry. But this distributor who has been with us for 30 years and is a major supplier or whatever, a major customer, we have to be vigilant. We have to retain the relationship, even though the customer is maybe at wrong and the customer has actually done what is detrimental to the relationship. It might serve us better to be more patient and to deal with that more wisely in a way that makes better corporate sense in the long term. So that skill is very, very important, that ability to judge properly. Okay, on that note, we are going to move to PESTEL. Everything in these two core activities, which is going to make at least a good 32 or 35 to 50% of your requirement and the scores, it will be from what we've looked at so far. SWOT factors, Mendelow's made stakeholder factors, and PESTEL factors. So you can actually link any scenario into one or two or three of these factors combined. So it's a very, very important point, or a very, very important area. In fact, that brings us to what we are going to look at next in this entire process. Let's see.